allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're here tonight at the beginning of the budget process with the ultimate goal of recommending a budget to taxpayers of Simsbury, a budget that we hope that they will be willing to fund. I want to thank everyone in this room who is here tonight in the spirit of a collegial and collaborative process. Tonight, we'll be taking a collective first look at some of the context within which we'll be developing our budgets. We have three boards meeting tonight: the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Education, and the Board of Finance. Each is essential. Our collaboration is like a three-legged stool. Without strong support from all three, we do not have a solid platform for Simsbury. With all three firmly doing its parts, it all works for all of us. We all share two competing tensions that are at the heart of the democratic process and responsible government. We want to have an exceptional school system that stands out in Connecticut, offering lifelong benefits to our children, and for which our community is known. We want a safe and beautiful community with open space, fantastic library, senior center, top recreational programming, and well-kept roads, and more. At the same time, we want to make Simsbury a town we can afford to live in, a diverse and vibrant town where young people can find a home, where elderly people can stay in their homes, and where taxes are not so high that we drive newcomers and businesses to neighboring towns. It's an enormous task. Each board has a slightly different focus and role, and all are trying to achieve the best for Simsbury. But like all towns across the country, there are always more needs than there are resources to meet those needs. For this reason, the tension is real. Each board must arbitrate competing requests for funding and priorities within already stretched budgets to get the pressure on each of them. I don't think we can entirely eliminate the tension, but I hope we can use that tension constructively to help balance and prioritize competing needs and as a basis for a collaborative budget dialogue. To help us craft a budget we are all proud to present to citizens. I and my colleagues on the Board of Finance look forward to working with our colleagues on the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education. With that, I'd like to start with introductions. Members of the Board of Finance include Bert Helfand, and Lisa Hebner, Art House, and Mike Doyle. We also have with us our Director of Finance extraordinaire, who has done a great job preparing for tonight and who has developed an excellent budget model, which we will be using later in the evening, so thank you for that. I want to turn it over to Wendy and then to Jeff, and then we'll begin.
Okay, I'd like to introduce the Board of Selectmen to everyone. So we have Curtis Looney, Heather Getz, me, Steve Antonio, Diana Geisley, and Kevin Beal.
Good evening, everybody. Appreciate being here. Jeff Tyndall from the Board of Education. With me up at the table is Jen Batchelor, our Vice Chair, Jessica Prusi, and Sharon Thomas.
Wendy and Jeff, would you like to introduce people, the staff that are with you tonight?
Sure. So I have Amy Merriweather, Finance Director Extraordinaire, Melissa Appleby, Budget Director Extraordinaire, Acting Deputy Town Manager Tom Fitzgerald, Lee Erdman, our Interim Town Manager, soon to be in permanent retirement, I believe, Mark Nelson, our incoming Town Manager.
And we'll obviously be at the table with Superintendent Matt Curtis. That'll be folks behind us. Answer each and every one of your questions.
Well, thank you. We're glad to be here. I hope, we need it in the spirit of dialogue and give and take, and we look forward to a robust discussion, not just tonight, but throughout the process. Okay, we're going to start with a very brief PowerPoint that I'll go through, then we're going to go on to lead and fixed costs, and then some capital considerations. The PowerPoint I'm going to fly because it is, whoa, whoa. Because because it's a little like the letter that I cannot do this.
Start talking numbers, we want that mic on.
I don't know that I can do this, Mark. Can you all bet?
Sounds loud on this in the room.
Okay. Okay, oh, I have the thing, wait. Tonight, we're at the beginning of the process, looking at some of the contexts within which we'll be evaluating the budget. The financial resources and condition of the town, affordability and willingness to pay estimates, economic competitiveness, and fixed cost estimates and capital. Simsbury has 3 budgets, operating, capital, and special revenue budgets. We're going to be talking about the first 2. Although capital is a separate budget, it has an operating component as debt service for borrowed projects. It's like a mortgage and is paid through the operating budgets. Simsbury, like almost every town in the country, always has more needs than there are resources to meet those needs. For this reason, each year, difficult choices must be made and policy boards must arbitrate among competing but important interest groups that want to share an already stretched budget. For this reason, below are typical prioritization questions based on best practices. They are not unique to Simsbury and are standard municipal budget questions that are asked in every town. And I'm not going to read them through, we'll post this online so you can take a look at them. But you'll see that they're questions that are asked every year by multiple boards, not just the Board of Finance. Most of them come from Government Financial Officers Association best practices. On a very positive note, Simsbury's financial position is strong. Simsbury recently had its AAA bond rating reaffirmed by S&P. A AAA rating is the highest rating a municipality can earn and saves on borrowing costs. This is a slide we show every year. These are Board of Finance policies. They have not changed. They're the same they've been for the last probably 3 or 4 years. Here you'll see that our pension and OPEB funds are well funded using reasonable investment assumptions. We are one of the few towns in Connecticut that has fully funded its OPEB, so congratulations to everyone in the room who's made that happen. Here's a snapshot of the financial condition of the town. We include last year's tax increase here because this year's budget will be evaluated within the context of last year's 5.18 median tax increase. The Social Security COLA this year is 3.2%. CPI in December is 3.1%, but the Federal Reserve is estimating it will end up at 2.8%. We should plan on using that 2.8% inflation rate through the municipal cap evaluation. The Board of Finance uses CPI and COLA as key indicators of students and affordability. 22% of our residents fall at or below the ALICE threshold, meaning that they are barely making it even though they are moving. This is Matt Curtis's favorite chart, so we put it in every year. State law requires municipal budgets to be balanced, meaning we must have sufficient revenues to cover our expenditures. Last year we spent about $118 million. You can see that most of it goes to education, then the town, then debt service. For revenues, like most towns in Connecticut, most of our revenues are from the property tax, 11% from intergovernmental money, and that just means state grants and municipal aid, and 3% other fees, fines, and charges. Here you see the history of past taxes and projected taxes. This is not what must be, but what may be. The decisions policy boards make during the budget process have the potential to change this trajectory. We are currently in fiscal year 2024, because the Board of Finance and in Connecticut do things differently, even though it is the year 2023, we are in fiscal year 2024. So what moves the mill rate? Not surprisingly, spending, debt service, non-tax revenues, again, state aid, fees, charges, fines, interest, and the grand list. The grand list is new economic development. Are we growing the pie? We're going to hear tonight about fixed costs, which make up about 83% of the town budget. Here you see debt service projections from the capital improvement plan approved by the Board of Selectmen in last year's budget. The Those debt service increases add to the operating budget and are legal obligations and will be funded first. Typical in municipal budgeting, here you see that most of Simsbury's debt again goes to education. Simsbury's grant list over the last 20 years has averaged about 1.2%, but the last 6 years having unusually strong grant list. That strong grant list helped mitigate tax increases. The assessor, in consultation with the town planner and the director of finance, is projecting below average grant list growth for the next 5 years. The soft grant list projections will require us to raise taxes or make expenditure reductions, difficult decisions. Here you see Simsbury's equalized net grant list per capita in comparison with our neighboring towns. As you can see, we're kind of on the low end of that per capita. But this tells us something very important about our community. It tells us that we do a great job leveraging more limited dollars than other towns to deliver a high quality of life. I credit that to a culture of frugality, watching every penny, ingenuity, and volunteerism. Here is the ratio of the tax burden. We get asked this every year. Of note, you'll see that Simsbury has a higher commercial percentage than Avon. A lot of our commercial, though, is in apartments. We have a higher percent of apartments than Avon. And apartments, as you know, carry more costs associated with them than some other commercial development. Here, you can see some of the challenge that we have going forward. Debt service is scheduled to go up 14.2% increase, or $1.1 million increase. Our grant list is 0.7% anticipated, although we will get an update in January. That's about $800,000 new increased revenue to the town. Our non-tax revenues are projected to go down 7.7%. It's mostly due to the loss of the motor vehicle reimbursement grant. We did make up some of that in other areas, but it's a net loss of about $1 million. And then later tonight, we're going to hear about fixed costs and needs. Here you see Simsbury's mill rate in comparison with other towns. Higher than Glastonbury and Farmington, but certainly not an outlier. This slide shows that Simsbury has consistently kept taxes at or below COLA, except for the year Governor Malloy proposed the unprecedented unfunded mandate on towns to contribute to teacher pensions, where we had to budget. So what needs to happen to reduce the tax increase? A higher grant list, state aid or other revenues. You can use some reserves, but for capital, not for the operating budget. Actuals on expenditures need to come in lower than projected, or we need to cut spending if that's what we decide to do. In terms of the Board of Finance and its role and timeline, the budget process is both collaborative and iterative, with information coming in and being refined throughout the next few months. Because the process culminates in the Board of Finance to send a budget to referendum for town charter, the Board of Finance offers initial guidance and targets and then updated guidance as information changes. It's not that the Board of Finance changes its mind, it's that the information changes. You'll see here we are in December, we now have COLA, CPI, we'll have fixed cost estimates, we know what our comparison mill rates are, and we will be reaffirming our budget policies after the Triboard. But they haven't changed in 4 years, and I don't anticipate them to change. January, we'll get new grant list updates, but the grant list is due February 1, so we'll have those fully refined in February. The governor's budget comes in February, so that's non-tax revenue comes in then. The Board of Selectmen and Board of Education have not even yet met to do their priorities. We'll understand what your priorities are, what you want to fund, and how we can find a way to finance those priorities. And then we'll go to public input at the public hearings in April and finally vote for referendum hopefully in May. So what might change these evaluations? Revenues or expenditures might come in better or worse than initially projected. Unfunded state mandates may arise that require us to fund. urgent health or safety need may be identified by the policy boards in the next few months, changes in the economic and social condition of the town, your board's priorities, and public input. The thing about the budgets is there's always enough revenue if you tax for it. The question always gets asked, should you tax for it? And the answer always is it depends. And that's where the back and forth conversation happens. And we are open to hearing what your needs are and how we're going to fund that. I think we're all working to fund everything that makes this a great town and keep it as affordable as we can. We'll have that back and forth conversation. But the guidance and the information will change over time, and as that happens, the evaluations will change as they should. We try to keep them fact-based. With that, we will turn it over to Lee to start with fixed costs, and after we do the fixed costs, we'll open it up for discussion.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I'm going to ask Amy to walk us through the fixed cost portion of the presentation.
Sure. So starting with the town, the salaries and benefits. So we just took all of our current approved positions, whether they're vacant or being occupied, and rolled it up based on the step increases and any anticipated changes. So for salaries and benefits, about a $280,000 increase on the town side, or 1.02% of the overall budget. Our contingency line item went down slightly. This is because last year we had a larger contingency. There was some about $180,000 of one-time expenses included in this contingency. We had an unallocated position, we had a couple pay changes, and then we also had early voting included in that line item. And then the current year line item is just for our open contracts. The health insurance line item, this is information that's given to us from our benefits consultant Lockton. Based on their first look at initial claims for the upcoming year, they're anticipating a 3% increase. So that 3% is included in the health insurance line. For pension, we reached out to Milliman and we had them run some budgetary estimates for us. The $220,000 increase is just an estimate at this point. We had asked them in the prior year to do an allocation of our Parks and Rec fund versus our general fund. And in looking at last year's numbers, something just looked off. So they're actually rerunning those. So we may have overcharged the Parks and Rec fund in the current year. So we may have to give them some back. So this is just an estimate to work from. Some of this might be reallocated to another fund. On the utility side, our Public Works Director put together some increases that were included in your packet. So the increase in the utility line item is just based on those market-driven increases. It's not based on a true-up of any gallon usage or anything of that nature. It's just strictly what the market is doing. And then on our LAP insurance side, this is from Kermer, our insurance provider, and here we used a 3% increase. So overall, the town fixed cost about $588,000 or 2.13 over the fiscal year 24 budget.
It's 0.14%.
The Board of Education, similar here. Again, we just rolled up our salaries and benefits. Our contingency line item, we only have a small group. Our nurses are unaffiliated this year, so that line went down. Our health insurance, we use the same guidance from Lockton, so the 3% increase noted there. For our pension, last year we had baked in a number for OPEB, so we can true that up since our OPEB is 100% funded. Our utilities, again, the same thing, just the market-driven increases that were provided by the Director of Public Works. And then our regular LAP insurance, again, a 3% increase, the same as the town. And then on our debt service, this is based on our actual debt service. We just went out and did an issuance in fiscal year, what are we in 2023. So this is based on our revised debt schedules of what our actual debt payments will be. So for the Board of Education, about $2.6 million in increased cost, or 3.24%. And then the total fixed cost, including our debt service, about $4.3 million, or 3.58%.
The only thing I would say is that from my perspective, I do not consider salaries and wages and benefits a fixed cost. They are negotiable. The workforce can go up, the workforce can go down, so. Certainly with service impacts, but, so that is something we need to look at every year.
What we'll do is we'll open it up to questions because we have so many of us. I talked with Wendy and Jeff in advance. What we'll do is I'm going to turn it over to Wendy to get initial questions, make sure everyone has a chance on the board of selectmen, then we'll go to the board of ed, and then we'll go to the board of finance, and then we'll open it up to general relationships, make sure everyone has a chance to ask a question or make a comment. So I think we'll start with you.
We're just gonna start with the section.
Right?
Yeah, let's start with the fix, just this section.
Just with the student.
Okay, I'm gonna see who on the side would like to. Oh, it's Diana. Okay. Go ahead.
I always have a question. Well, it kind of plays off what Lee's comment was about the salaries. Are the increases that you see both for the town and the Board of Ed side, are those just increases in salaries for existing positions that you're looking for pay raises, or they're not new positions on either side that we are looking to increase town
Correct.
staff or board of
Negotiated
teachers?
contracts.
Right.
Nothing new.
Now, obviously, there may be some things, either on the town side or the Board of Ed side, that may come up that we would be requesting in your budget represent our budget prep. That, okay, so that's not included in these
Right.
numbers, these are just negotiated. Thank you.
Oh, I'll keep going on our side. Heather?
I kind of more of a comment, but we talk a lot about taxing more or cutting in areas where if we can't be leaner and equally efficient, provide a great service, we should be doing that. But, you know, this looks like it's over the next few years, the grand list is increasing at such a small amount. How do we really focus on growth opportunities? You know, is there a way, we have a high cost with special needs, is there a way to bring our special needs in and set up our own program where we actually gain some revenues from it and are not sending these kids out, not having to pay those costs? Are there any growth opportunities for us as a town utilizing our assets in better ways, or perhaps looking to find, you know, a real business that we can bring in that doesn't change the feel of Simsbury, but allows a tax base to help us start to pay for some of these things that we really
I'll just roll into that. You know, we noticed the 0.7 grand list growth, which seems very low, and we had such a good increase over the last few years. It's frustrating to see that because it's really the grand list is really where we can get our revenues from. So I agree that we need to find sources of that. The other thing I just wanted to loop into that is some of the money that we get is from the pilot program, right from the state. We get a lot of that goes. I'm not sure who gets that. They're looking at that at the state level because do we get money for all of the private schools, the churches, the things like that? Like I know if you have a university, you get money back. There are certain things, but do we qualify for any of those pilot programs? And I'm just curious.
There's very little, but I think Amy or Melissa can comment on specifically what we get pilot money for.
We get a couple different pilots. We get pilot money for our open space. We get pilot money for a taxing program that they had put into place for municipal revenue sharing. Nothing related to the private schools though. Westminster offers a generous donation of $120,000 a year. They are not required to do that, it's just something that they do. But aside from that, it's very limited.
So that's just one thing, it'd be nice if we could, I think Leah and I kind of maybe joked about it, but do we go to the private schools, the people tend to ask to see if people want to pony up, because it's lots of land that is untaxed in the community.
Never hurts to ask.
We're not getting any money for, right?
One of the interesting things, Simsbury has 12% of its tax base is tax exempt, which is higher than some of our neighboring communities, so that may be of interest change to those. So it is worth looking into that. For that reason, the Board of Finance has requested. We do an evaluation on that area as well. I'll let you continue with your.
I'm going to stop so I can defer to other people on this side. Have anything like that?
I have nothing.
Nothing to fix cost.
Okay, nothing on the cost, so, oh, I do have one more thing I want to mention. I sent the email I got an email today that the state is looking at the 15 towns that fall below the mill rate, because we're getting kind of stiffed on the motor vehicle reimbursement. So I just think that maybe something will happen there and we'll get some of that money to be made whole.
Okay, Jim.
At first, I just really wanted to echo what Wendy and Heather said. We focus, and very rightly so, on taxes a lot in these conversations, but we very clearly have a grand list issue. Actually, I think in some of those out years, it was a negative number, and that's extremely concerning. So, and you both have heard me say this, anything we can do to focus on that, take a real, significant, serious deep dive on that issue is greatly appreciated. I say that just as a president. I don't necessarily have any questions about the fixed costs themselves, but let me open it up to the board. Anybody?
So I would say it's just interesting looking back at some of the historical data on when the grand list was thin years ago, and we had, very limited budgeted increases. They were sub-twos for several years. We were fortunate that the enrollment of the school system was taking a nosedive at that time. I mean, to the tune of a couple hundred students a year, and we were able to take tremendous offsets without hurting the quality of programming just from attrition. And we kind of have the opposite going on right now. It's a little bit of a tough soup when you look at where we are, because you look at COLA, which you said how we've aligned it on the tax increase side. Both the fixed costs are kind of within that average, but I don't think it would yield a tax increase that would, I haven't seen it yet, but would be there, right? Because we don't have the grand list to play with. So it is, I think, a different dilemma at this point in time than problems we've tried to solve in the past.
Yeah, I think that goes to the point of thinking it's going to be collaborative. We have forwarded to our board your projections on school enrollment, so we are aware of that, but it might be helpful to forward that information to the Board of Selectmen as well. So it's not a simple formula.
No.
You have to look at the needs and what we need to provide.
And I'll just say, I mean, we're not presenting on it tonight. I think Heather makes an interesting, we've talked about special services last year a little bit, and some of the costs associated with that. I think we have some interesting data to share about the absolute growth in that area, both in terms of outplacement students, what the private sector market with outplacements is kind of demanding in terms of cost, as well as just what we're trying to do to solidify some of our internalized programs and be more effective with them while we're seeing that growth. It's just an interesting time.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge. Because we're also seeing some population growth as well. We just heard from the ambulance earlier what that means. Now, I'll open it up to comments from the Board of Finance, and I'll go down the line, and I'll start with Art.
Sure, so just a question, I'm looking at I assume these are the types of questions we're looking at, like the salary and benefits on the Board of Ed. When I do the math, I mean, we showed us 3%, but that's really over the entire amount. If you look at it by itself, it's growing more like 4 to 5.
It's like 4.4, almost 4.5. Yeah.
So how should we think about, is that just contractual?
So, I mean, we
increases?
settled our
we're not adding
contract.
roles.
Yeah, a little bit over a year ago. It was in alignment with what was going in the market. It was a little under 12 over 3 years, which kind of yields a little over 4 when you get the step increases and those things on an annual basis.
And at this point, the fixed costs in Amy, I think, has told us those do not include vacancies or requirements yet. And once you get
Correct.
those in, new hires are generally about, I think you said in the past, about 20% lower.
Right.
So that enables to get that a little bit lower. So the fixed costs will change. This is just fixed costs. We're going to see
Right,
that
it's a straight roll up.
transition.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Todd?
I don't have any questions on this question.
I'll save mine.
All right. You have any questions?
We've covered everything. I guess my own perspective, a little historical, is that last year it was over 5%. no rate increase. There are people in the town who said, last year was really rough. I hope that was a one-off. And, well, you knock on doors, and if you go around town, there are people who are hurting, and they just paid a 5% increase. And so I think that also has to be on our data set as we look forward.
It's one of those three ways, yep, for sure. Mike?
I have no question.
I'll open it up to any follow-up questions if anyone had anything based on what we've heard or.
I'll make just one comment, which I think someone already made. The salaries and benefits that are proposed here for both the Board of Ed and since we have discussed the other night budget, it could, if people are looking to expand a department or hire additional people, these are going to go up, right, if we approve that.
Correct.
So that potential is still there to have any of those discussions.
Why didn't you go ahead? Oh, you know, Mark, I'm sorry. I had to give you an opportunity.
No questions, Madam Chair. Just a point of interest. I just got the City of Poughkeepsie's budget passed last night. They're on a different fiscal year, so I'm budget heavy, but no questions for this. Thanks so much.
Lee's going to do not a proposal, but sort of a scenario planning for some capital, as I understand. Is that right?
Capital, yes. Yes. Please consider the preliminary CIP and CNR plans as experimental this year. We have never put out a plan in December. We did it specifically because we thought it would help to engender discussion and an earlier thought process about priorities. There are some innovations, particularly in the CIP. This year we put together a capital planning advisory committee of staff, including the Board of Education, to review all the projects, to develop a set of ranking criteria and apply those criteria to all the first-year CIP projects. We've expanded the plan from a 6-year plan to a 12-year plan, plus years 13 to 20, so we have a 20-year outlook on the town's needs. I think one of the things that's important to me in these plans is that I'm making a statement that I think the town needs to put more resources into its capital projects, into its CNR projects. And Amy's going to talk a little later about some ideas we have to boost the resources that are going into those plans. They're not realistic for this coming year, but it's a place to start. I fully expect that based on feedback we get, Mark will probably come in with a somewhat different set of plans in February, particularly after he meshes those plans with the operating budget. There is one specific project we'd like to bring the Triboard up to date on this evening, and that's recent information we've gotten concerning the PAC project. And our Public Works Director, Tom Roy, is here this evening to briefly bring us up to date on the status of that project, and hopefully get you all thinking about what the priority of that project should be in relationship to other projects. Right now we're showing that project for 25, 26. It's not a first-year project. But Tom, could you step up and, I think Tom has a handout related to that project, then he'll very briefly speak about where we are.
Like how he says, very briefly.
Well, Tom's getting it up, can I just say a couple things?
Yes.
So everyone probably in the room is aware that the state bonding agency is $900,000 for the project. It was on our CIP for 23-24 for $2.1 million, and then it got pushed out in this plan here to 25-26, and it's a higher cost, 2.7. So it's quite a bit more money. And I do want to just say a couple things, just generally speaking from our side, is that our board has not at all weighed in on any of the priorities here yet. We have not done goal setting as a board. So I just want to make that clear that what Lee's presenting here in this planning advisory committee was an administrative town side. And so just want to clarify that we have not gotten to that yet on our side. So things may be changing based on the board's priorities from the community and for our meetings that we feel are.
So I think to Wendy's point, we're trying to hit a moving target. The Performing Arts Center, which has been in place for well over 20 years, has always used trailers, portable trailers in the summer months for their events, for the performance. They've always had the dream of extending that facility out, making it a year-round facility, having appropriate green rooms. Thanks, Mark. Don't worry, Mark, you're not making me nervous at all.
Yes or no?
Carol, you want me to hold it? Hold. Okay. With the addition that would give them year-round access to the facility, it would be an enhancement that they've been looking for, like I said, about 20 years. The challenge is, as we were working through the preliminary numbers, we were in the range of $2.1 million. As we paralleled the process and we went for the state bonding, the Performing Arts Center had full set of design drawings completed. So we looked thoroughly at the existing building. We looked at all of the details for how this final design would come to fruition. The town then took those design plans, we took them to a professional construction estimator, and the town paid to make sure we got a good cost estimate. Good or bad, that number came back at $2.48 million. That does not include construction oversight and bonding costs, which pushes the total value of this project up to about $2.7 million. With the Performing Arts Center's best estimate, they think they can come up with another $400,000 in fundraising. That still leaves us just shy of $1 million in order to fund this project. So, good news is that we got the bonding. The bad news is there's still a significant gap. Go ahead.
The bond, is the bonding contingent on needing to be done at a certain time? Are there any situations?
The bonding is somewhat fluid right now. This is all moving very quickly. It just came into play last Friday. We're still not 100% sure when we would get the bonding. Our understanding is that we submitted on being able to do this project this coming winter. So a year from now, we'd be in construction. So I think some of the questions that we need to put together for the bonding authorization is when would we need to use that money by? The challenge would be, could the Performing Arts Center fundraise in time for this project? And how would we go forward without necessarily having that firm commitment of dollars in hand?
Has the PAC, and this could be a question for them, looked into capital improvement grants that they can get to increase their additional donations towards this project?
I believe they have looked into grants. As always the case, it's finding that next grant. And the other question would be, is there any additional grant or other opportunities that we could leverage with our existing funding?
I just want to weigh in. I reached out to federal and the Congresswoman's office today just to find out any additional funding to get us over the hump. And what I was told is there's really not money for capital projects. There's funding for other arts enrichment projects that are 50-50 matches. So they're going to look into it, but they do not think there's any money in that.
The two other small pieces to this is we are budgeting roughly $250,000 for inspection services. We did talk about whether or not we could do that internally if we were to add a staff member to the engineering department, which is something we've considered based upon the number of projects we're currently handling. So it would save the project at that cost. And the second thing is, part of the way all of these project grows is because it's an addition to an existing building, the cost went up because we can't put a roof just on the new part of the building and ignore a 25-year-old roof next to it. We can't put new siding next to the old siding. So that's in part why some of the numbers grew. We did push back very hard during the design process, and there is not a lot of fluff in this design. It's not an opulent setup. It's a functional building that fits appropriately into the space.
Question, I'm still new to the group, so this might be a bad question, but you talk a lot about the expenses here. Is there any revenue generation that comes out of this?
I don't know, I heard Wendy laugh. I'd love to hand that one back over. But right now, the Performing Arts Center doesn't bring in a great deal of money in terms of profit. However, there's the impact to the community, which, you know, what does this mean to our businesses? What does this mean to Simsbury to support the arts?
I was going to add, you know, they're going to be downtown, so right, so there's going to be economic development there. The other question that we asked, and I'm not sure if everyone's aware of this, but the town will own that building. The town owns that land. It will be a town resource, right, and a town part of our infrastructure. So we also, questions that we asked is how can we use that, you know, maybe we can use it for community space, offset other costs elsewhere, you know, and that's the kind of stuff that we have to highlight if the funding is actually going to be considered, right, you know, before we make that decision.
One of the things I'll say about capital is the Board of Finance generally doesn't get into the prioritization. We get into the level amount. Where we get into the prioritization is if you don't comply with the policy, or if there is something that is an outlier that hasn't been on the CIP for a number of years that just popped up that isn't part of the master plan, or if there's something unusual. But generally, we set the number and we rely on the Selectmen and the Board of Education to prioritize within that number. You saw the questions we'll ask you those questions. They're the same questions we ask every year. I'm sure they're the questions we yourself ask, but beyond that, if the problem comes when we don't have the capital prioritized, then we prioritize for you, but we don't have that. So please come to us with prioritized capital.
Lisa, I'm going to ask Matt if he wants to make a few comments, or any of the board members want to make a few comments on the preliminary education CIP.
Yeah, I would just say, Lee, I appreciate, you know, your perspective on this and pulling this 12-year look together. It's not something we've done. I think it's been a beneficial exercise for us. My board's been updated on the process more than they are the actual content of anything beyond year one. So we did take an early look at year one, but haven't had an opportunity to kind of talk through our own prioritization or any changes we may want to take. Obviously, the big piece that's hanging out there in terms of our facilities is quite a few years out, but it's Squadron Line, and the real challenge I think that the community faces on either side when we try to move through a large-scale project and what that does to debt service in lieu of your policies, right? So I think that continues to be the conversation, the push-pull, and the tension is, as we try to carry out kind of those long-term plans, is there flex on those policies, is there not, and we need to relook at those projects in different ways and all those things. But last year we talked about getting that squadron number out there a little bit, just so we weren't kidding ourselves on what the next need was, what that actually looks like as a project in total. I think there's a lot of flexibility and room for discussion on this.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that. We appreciate you doing that. We appreciate you taking such a hard look. I think, obviously, the grant list is something that we focus on, all of us, on the long term, because that helps everyone. I want to congratulate Amy and the assessor. We were looking at negative grant list because of the work the assessor's office did. They got it up to 0.7, and we'll probably get a little bit higher. So, hopefully, right?
Fingers crossed.
But, so the assessor's office are really trying to capture all the growth so that we have the ability to spend on the needs that we want. But I think the points made about grant list, if we're all really about the grant list, is what we're going to be able to do going forward. And intense pursuit of grants.
Okay, I was going to raise that
intense
question.
pursuit. And then every money, this is going to be one of those years. 2,000 isn't worth it in a budget, 118. Well, 2,000 $50,000 funds programming for aging and disability. It's worth it to them. So every dollar we'll be focusing on. Okay.
Lisa, thank you. Yes, let me add that we did take the bold step this year, maybe this has been done in the past, I'm not sure, of projecting the debt service going forward and the percent that the debt service would be of the operating budget. And our first pass of that, based on the projects requested by all the departments, was 9.95%. We said, oh my gosh, that's awfully close to 10%. So we did make some adjustments, and we've gotten it down to 9.15% as the peak. We know that's way beyond the Board of Finance's policy, and we have a lot of work to do, and I'm confident Mark and the staff are going to do it.
When you make those estimates, what growth did you plan on in the operating budget? Was it the same slide that Lisa showed?
It's a conservative 3%.
Yeah. The other thing I would point out is we also took the opportunity to share some additional information with the boards that may or may not have been shared in the past. One was I asked Chief Bolter to work on a little experiment with me to show you the current status of all of the vehicles in the police fleet. You know, the make, the model, the mileage, et cetera. And we're hopeful that that kind of information is helpful to you. If it is, we can produce it for the rest of the departments as well. And we can use it in terms of the discussion of the multi-year CNR plan. The second piece of information that we provided was we anticipated in this time frame that there will be discussion about the need for additional athletic fields. So I challenged our Culture, Parks, and Recreation Director to see what he could come up with, working with the various sports leagues in terms of a projected need over the next 5 and 10 years for additional athletic fields. And I thought he and the sports leagues did a pretty incredible job in a very short period of time. Again, this is just for illustrative purposes. It's the kind of analysis and projections that the staff can do. So if there are areas that you are interested in this upcoming budget process where you would like more information that hopefully will help you, we're certainly prepared to provide that.
Thank you, that was very helpful. Do you have more you want to show us?
I think the only other thing we'd like to show you is I'd like to ask Amy to delve into a little bit about some of our thinking for how to provide more resources to both the CIP and the CNR, which will not fit into your policies, but we wanted to share with you some of the things,
anyway.
some of the things that can be done if there's a will to do them.
So I'm going to start with the CNR because that's just easier.
CNR just for the public.
Oh, sorry, capital non-recurring. So we have for the town $416,250 that we fund every year. This is based on a payback, so we spend the $416,000, but we pay it back over 5 years. We do the same thing on the Board of Education side, except their amount is $550,300. So part of the CNR funding, to be able to increase the maintenance associated with our buildings, is to add $1 million to that. So we would give, essentially, the way we have it outlined is the Board of Ed would get 70%, and the town would get 30%.
And that's only 1/3 of a mill.
But since we're paying, it back over 5 years, we don't have to pay for that $1 million up front. So you take the $1 million, you divide it by 5 years, you get to spend $1 million, but our budget is only going to charge $200,000 between the town and the Board of Education. So that's an easy way to increase our resources by $1 million in this instance, but we'll pay it back over the 5 years, so you're minimizing your cost to $200,000 a year. So then that would give the town about $716,000, and I think it adds about $700,000 to the Board of Ed side. And then for some of you that were here last year, you may recall, and those of you that are new, we have been putting off the purchase of our buses. So we are getting to the point where we need to start getting on a recurring plan to start purchasing those buses. So about $300,000 of that would be utilized to start doing a bus replacement schedule like we used to do in the past. Any questions on the capital non-recurring?
I have one.
Mhm.
Your proposal to do $1 million with a 5-year payback, that requires us to pre-fund it at quite a bit higher than $1 million. Because we pre-funded the 416 at the board, and then I think that was like $2 million pre-fund, just on the town side. So how much would the pre-fund be to get the $200,000 a year?
So we either could pre-fund it and we can keep that much in reserves, or we know we have the money in reserves if we ever wanted it. Because the money that we pre-funded, the 1.9, just sits in CNR. We don't do anything with it.
Well, it is separately. Well, we'll talk about
It is separate, but you don't need it. So we have enough in our cash flow where we can pre-fund $1 million. We pre-fund all of our capital projects. So we bond every other year, but all of that money is still being spent in between the every other year. So we're giving our cash and we're pre-funding it, and then we're paying ourselves back with the bonding that we do. So essentially this would be the same thing. And $1 million compared to our cash flow is, I'm not worried about it.
So something we can explore further, certainly.
Do this every year? So then in 5 years, 200 is gonna add up to $1 million anyway, so.
Right.
Not
So-
additional, a nicer 4 years.
I've been on this
No.
for a couple of years now, so when I joined, Lisa very patiently explained CNR. And that was great, but I'm willing to bet that there are people at this table who have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know.
It's an education
I've forgotten
process.
What I learned. So maybe you should take a step back and explain how CNR works.
So essentially we have $416,000 that the town can spend. We allow you to spend $416,000 in one given year, but those projects are only being paid for over 5 years, so $83,250. But since we've already gone through the 5-year cycle, we're contributing $416,250. So,
You said every year.
every year, right?
Well, so, here, I'm gonna try and explain it in a way, this gets so wonky, right? So the first year, you spend $416, but you only have to pay back a fifth of it. So how did you spend that $415, right? So we pre-funded it. In the second year, same thing, you only pay a fifth back, but now you've gotta pay a fifth of that second floor and a fifth of the first floor. So how did you do that? We pre-funded it. At some point, you have to fund the full amount over the 5 years. 400,000 over 5 years is $2 million. But you don't have to fund the full amount because it starts paying it back. You get a payback. So it's about $1.6 million to fund it so that you only have to do the 5-year payback. So it is generally a big initial push. And then it's a self-fund. You're repaying your own loan. It generates itself. So I'd like to hear more about what you have to say, because that's different than, you're proposing something different than the way you've done it in the past. And we're just hearing about it tonight, so obviously. That's something to consider over the long term, and it would be helpful
Right.
to see it in writing, I think, so that we could really.
Yeah,
resolve
absolutely.
it.
Sure.
Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but years and years ago when this construct was put in place, one of the reasons also was so it couldn't be a quick place that the Board of Ed or the Board of Selectmen would go to in a tight budget year to say, you know what, we'll just cut 400 because you're not going to get the bang for it. You're not going to get the full cut because of the payback. So it kind of worked as a protection both ways, which was interesting.
Right.
And just to put it in perspective, that 500,000 for the Board of Ed has been that way, I think, for 30 years. And out of that number, we buy our school buses and are expected to update all 7 of our buildings. So the school bus escalation over that time for the 2 buses cost $300. So, I mean, it's just a challenge in a line item that I think had a good vision of what it was supposed to be, is a little outdated.
So it can still
It's
have,
interesting,
it can
yeah.
still have used. One of the things we have now is something called capital reserves. Lee's proposal has all town projects. There are no Board of Ed projects. That is for town and Board of Education projects. So that is available. The problem with capital reserves, or not a problem, but the decision on your point, is if it's used out of capital reserves, it's no longer the Board of Education budget, it's a capital budget, and so it has to be used as spent. You don't have the same flexibility to move stuff around. If it's within the CNR budget, it's not even raised, it stays in the Board of Ed. It's not the end of the world. If you know you need a capital project, it doesn't matter which buckets, that's up to you. That's something to consider. But there is capital reserves out there. Right now, we're not showing any Board of Ed projects. That may be a point of discussion for all of you to decide and prioritize within that. That there's a pool of money there that can help with
No, we appreciate it. Just to put a final point on what Matt's saying, though, is we're working off of a 30-year-old number, right? And that's, we'd love to have some additional conversations about that.
Yeah, and that's really the main point that I wanted to make is I think the town should be putting more money into CNR and more money into CIP as funds are available. That we do risk falling behind and deferring projects to the point where we find ourselves having to do projects because they're a piece of rolling stock is at the end, well past its useful life, or a building is going to require a lot more investment because we weren't able to put the maintenance into it along the way, that sort of thing. So we do look forward to having further discussions about that.
I have a comment. I thought Bert was just asking, do people know what CNR is and that it's $250,000 projects or less? I was going simplistically. That would work. And then on the 416 payback, right, is a general fund transfer. So basically, tell me if I'm wrong, Amy, it's a lump sum of money coming out of the general fund that we use to pay for the items that are 250 or under in the current year, right? So basically, you're saying you want to bump that up so we can pay for more stuff this year.
Correct.
Right.
So the question I have is, and I know it's in here somewhere, where is the 416? Where was that ever, is that a state thing? Is that a defined thing by the town? Is that a Board of Finance thing that we made 416? How long has it been 416?
And it's been probably 20 years. But the problem was it had to be pre-funded. There was one time we had a lot of extra cash, and we said, let's pre-fund it or create this revenue source, and that's how it started.
Okay.
We have, over the past 5 years, because of the problem you've identified, on the Board of Selectmen side, increased that in the operating budgets. We used to pay for the plow truck out of that 416, $280,000, right? And we said, that eats up that 416. Let's put it in Tom Roy's operating budget, and we did. But that is now in addition to the 416.
So that's
Police vehicles have been added. That's in addition to the 416. We've been slowly adding it up. It's now more than double than what it was 5 years ago.
Okay.
But the Board of Ed has not seen that, and part of the reason is some of the constraints that you have on other areas. But we do have this reserve, and so there is a revenue bucket available that I think we need to balance with some of the town needs as well.
So just to confirm, the operating transfer line is the money that you're talking about to pay for the things in the CNR that are coming out of the operating budget.
So there are different, we have all these acronyms, but I believe we call it an operating transfer. So it's budgeted, it's tied to the department budget, so that we see whose capital it is. And because because it's capital, we then move it into the capital budget as an operating transfer. The reason why you do that is because capital expenditures don't have to be spent in the fiscal year. Capital projects can be spent over 3 years, and sometimes with capital, it takes a while to get it. And otherwise, you have to reappropriate it. So we move it into the capital budget for that reason. But it's anything that happens year over year over year, like buses or like plow trucks or like these vehicles. If it's a capital that happens year over year over year, should be tied to the operating budget, and it's considered base capital. Anything that doesn't happen, that's periodic, that happens sometimes over a period of time, generally does into the capital budget, is how we've approached it. The problem is if we were starting from fresh, would we put it all in the operating budget? Maybe. You can do that if you want your taxes to go through the roof. So the problem we've had is, while we would like to do that, the tax increases have not enabled us to do that as much as perhaps we would like, because we are, get ready for it, Todd, we're an arbiter community. You told me not to go there, I'm going there. It's a term used by Robert Plant, who was my personal hero on municipal budgeting. He's an expert out there, and his name is Robert Plant. And he said that most communities in the United States are arbiter communities, meaning there are more needs than there are resources to meet them. And so the policy boards have to become arbiters of competing interests. And that is most towns. Not every town. Greenwich is not an arbiter community. They have high needs and high resources and they do it. We're not Greenwich. We're like 99% of every other community. There are some communities that are caretaker communities, and some of our struggling cities are caretaker communities. They can barely keep the lights on. We're not that. And then the last is, I call it go-go community. They're growing like crazy, and those are the towns that border when you see developments popping up and new schools popping up. But we are considered an arbiter community. That's the challenge. Sorry, Todd.
No, I didn't want to hold the information back. When I read the description, I just looked at it and said, who isn't like that? It's...
Well, Greenwich is not.
It's kind of the whole point. I mean, we have a very long list of needs, and it would be wonderful to have the resources, but that's where the decisions have to be made. And I just thought that it was like, of course.
Lisa, can I make one other point related to both the CIP and the CNR? As you review these preliminary plans, you'll notice that some projects are in a bolder type than others, and those bolder typed projects are new projects. So, for instance, under the Board of Education, district flooring improvements. I don't believe you have seen that before, and it's an attempt to consolidate system-wide the flooring needs of the schools, and it's one of the areas where Melissa and I noted from our tour of the schools over the summer that more needs to be done. So we thought one way to address it might be to set up a system-wide project for that. The Board of Education figured out what the amount should be to address the need, and so we wanted to point out there's a number of those projects in both the CIP and the CNR that are essentially new projects you haven't seen before, and we'll look forward to discussing those more as we go through the process.
Just a legal thing charter, anything that hasn't been on the CIP the previous year does require 4 votes of the Board of Selectmen to move that forward. It has a higher threshold because of that. The theory behind that is, in an ideal world, projects would be on the CIP for 5 years. Get for signed as they get closer to start dates. And the reason for that is that these multiple boards have an opportunity to vet it over time. It's not just something I have a good idea or this need just came up and it was a two-step first time. That doesn't always happen for these.
I think that's all I wanted to say about the CIP and CNR, unless there are any other questions on those.
and how much is in there? If somebody, I think it's, I mean, what's the amount that's in there right now?
I have to look, I don't know offhand.
While she's looking, Wendy, why don't you talk about how we utilized capital reserves last year in the budget and how that worked?
Okay, thank you for asking me that. I feel like I'm in class and you're asking me a question that I have.
Well, you did a nice job. Your board did a nice job of that.
Well, actually, last year we had ARPA funding.
Which was actually in capital reserves, but
So
yeah.
it was, oh, sure, so we had $7.5 million over the last 2 years. And it was lucky, it was nice for our board to have that like little bucket, nest egg to do some capital projects that were already in the plan. So we alleviated the bonding issue and anything like that. And we were able to add a couple of new projects in the plan. Yeah, what else do you want to say?
That's great.
And then we did use some of the, I just will just throw on here, we did use some of the ARPA funding and bonded some programs, and there was some of the suggestion of Selectmen gets to offset the debt service amount, so we were able to reduce, and with your help, we all been able that, we got a nice reduction over the next 5-10 years with some of that money too.
Sadie, I think you pulled up about
Yeah.
4.7.
Yeah, unassigned about 4.7 million.
We will not spend it all the way down because best practice is to keep them. We haven't, our board is still debating this 500 to $1 million there. And the reason why we do that is if there's an emergency cost overrides or an unplanned match for a grant. But that is a source of revenue that will be available that will help mitigate some of that challenges we're going to have to use capital reserves just on the operating side, not just on the capital side, not on the operating.
One thing I was going to say is that, will help us next year. We did put in a couple million, I believe, at year end from savings, from revenues and expenditures. So we did bump it up, and we didn't use it when we funded some year end stuff, so that we have that available, so that we can prioritize some of these projects and do them as part of the budget, and have, I think, some potential money that we can spend on some of these projects.
Yeah.
Lisa, just a quick question if I can. So with respect to using capital reserves, I realize it's just for capital, not for operating, but in the Board of Finance policies, I didn't see anything that would specifically encourage our use of fund balance to mitigate or smooth tax increases. So, let's say you've got tax increases that are high and projected to be high for 3 to 4 years. On the pension side, on the actuarial side, it's common practice to smooth for those wins and losses. Why wouldn't the board consider, just an idea, authorizing the use of fund balance to mitigate it if you're estimating tax increases that are 4, 5, and 6 for the next 4 or 5 years? It seems to me that it's not operating, it's not capital, but it's mitigating your tax increase. So if you were able to smooth out based on this analysis, would the Board of Finance reject that out of hand? Or is it a suggestion that would warrant at least a little more conversation?
I think it would warrant more conversation. We had in the past used that when we were facing the loss of the Hartford.
Right.
At that point, we did mitigate that loss over a series of
5 years.
Yeah, I think it was 3 years.
3.
We ended up with strong grand lists, so we didn't do it that way. But the plan was to do it under that. Are we in those circumstances? I don't know. In the past, I know our preference has been let's bond less and save on debt service.
Right.
Or in the past, we said, you know what, our pension funds weren't doing as well. Let's put it in there. We reduced the ARC. We like to do things that are extended over time, but happy to consider to at least see the analysis.
And then if somebody could educate me quickly on why debt service is going up 1.1 million this year, what triggered that? I haven't dug into it yet.
It was the number of projects the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance and the public have approved. It was, I would say, we had a large increase because we did Latimer Lane.
That's the big one.
The big one was Latimer.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And so we did have to adjust our policy. It
Yeah.
was 7%. We did permitted to go a little bit over to accommodate that project, and we expended the years of bonding to, I think, 20 years. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah.
Our general preference is to do
10,
10,
yeah.
maybe 15 for a big project like this next few years, we're gonna, as we try to balance those three legs, we're interested in hearing your ideas.
Just questions right now, but thank you very much.
Yeah. One of the things we do, just for, so you know, how do we fund capital reserves? Where is that money coming from? One of the things we do is GFOA best practices on, and we do conservative revenue budgeting. Government Financial Officers Association. We do conservative revenue budgeting, which means we think we're going to get less than we actually do get. It is a planned conservative budgeting. We do that with the tax collection assumption rate, which usually brings in $600,000 to $800,000. The reason why we do that is that money is variable. It doesn't always work out that way. But any money we have left over, we hold, and it's now available for the following year's budget. It's what Massachusetts does. They call it a terrible, terrible name. They call it free cash. It is a horrible name, a horrible messaging thing, but it is a standard practice of one of the policies we do follow. We do objective budgeting in the operating budget, which means try to get as close to actuals. But for revenue, we do conservative budgeting, and that enables us to have the money in the following year to put towards capital. So it's kind of doing it backwards. You could say, well, let's just get rid of it. Well, okay, 1 year, hooray, tax holiday, the next year you got a budget for it, you created a cliff. So it doesn't really say it's just a gimmick if you do that, but it's a little bit backwards.
If I could add to that, Lisa, one of the ideas we're suggesting in the CIP is if over the course of the next 5 to 10 years you end up doing a very big project, we're suggesting that the dollars that are available at the end of a fiscal year, 1 or 2 million, whatever it is, be put into capital and then perhaps dedicated to that very large project. Let it accumulate over some number of years so that when we go to bond that project, we have to bond less. And certainly if we're facing a $100 million project at some point in this period, then that would be, in my view, more important to consider doing than if we're facing some smaller projects.
I think that's certainly to consider. I think state law limits us to a 5-year period, right? We can't do that. So we want to check on that. But the other thing to do is use that to create debt capacity and not borrow as much.
Right.
And maintain the debt service line steady
Yep.
as we reduce debt, so that by the time we're ready to bond, we now have capacity.
Yes.
That's the other way.
Yep.
Yeah, we could look at
Either
that.
would work, yeah.
Certainly look at both.
I have a question for Lee on the sports fields that you had
Yes.
requested. First of all, can you, I mean, I see in here their explanation of needing additional fields and improvements and irrigation. But on this, you claim financial impact is none on the submission, and I don't see it as part of the CIP at all. So can you explain to me what the impact of the town is? Is this a financial impact none currently with a projected budget line item at some point, or can you just explain that to me?
Tom Taberski, are you out there? Can you help me with that?
I didn't put together the submission, but eventually there would be an impact. There's nothing next year planned above what we currently maintain. But I do believe in the CIP we have a potential for build out of 6 fields.
I think so.
Off the top of my head, we have it. It was like roughly $4 to $5 million. Potentially could go up to 6.
Meadowwood athletic fields.
That would be, for example, the Meadowwood site. If there were any fields over there, the number might be $5 to $6 million. That number could be subsidized through more groups, partly with the town, to knock that number down. Just like any significant project, I think going forward would require some investment from these support groups. Did I answer your question?
And the youth sports groups are raising money to help with that stuff. I'm on the board for the Simsbury Soccer Club. They're actively chasing every dollar and every grant they can for just those purposes.
Diane, if I can answer your question, within the CIP,
Yeah.
under Culture, Parks, and Recreation, the last project listed, Meadowwood Athletic Field Complex, 3.5 million in 26-27. So that's the plug we've put in there for discussion purposes.
We did not do the capital project sheets, but the capital project sheets do list operating.
Oh, there it is. I got it.
Yes, I should mention that because we pushed the schedule up to come up with a preliminary set of plans to provide you all in December, although each of the departments that requested projects prepared a backup sheet that details the project and the components of the cost, those sheets need more work before we're ready to present them to you. So we did not include them in the packet, but in the budget that Mark is going to submit in February, you will have that detailed backup information. Essentially a full sheet that describes each of the projects. And that's also true of the CNR projects.
Lee, conceptually, are those fields grass or turf?
They've been grass.
All grass?
At this point.
Good.
I have comments on that because, so I've already heard these comments, but I think I'm the only one left on the board that was here when we bought Meadowwood, other than the guys at the end of the table. And there's the 24 acres that are the town-owned land that are supposed to be determined use by the town. So this is not a proposal here, that the 24 acres, we would hope to use the highest and best use of that property at the time. So I just wanted to point that out here. I did have a question, if I can segue into a bonding question. So I know we do normally do 10-year bonds, and we did a longer-term bond on Latimer. What stops us? I'm sure there's a reason why for, say, a police station or a new school, don't we do like a 30-year bond because it's really a mortgage and that building is, the intergenerational equity is going to last for that whole period of time. Why can't we bond longer for something that's going to last more than 30 years so that everybody pays for it? Is there a law?
No.
Oh, okay.
There's not a law, it's permitted, and some towns do that, but the policy decision made by past Board of Finance boards, and I don't disagree with them, is that those decisions then last with you for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And the policy that comes later may curse you, saying, why did you use up all our debt bonding capacity? We have all these other projects we want to do. So it's a balance. We did extend for Latimer, it's the longest bond we've ever done, which was 20 years, because the need was demonstrated was so great. And we extended our debt service to accommodate that. But it's going to tie our hands. It means less bonding capacity for other projects going down the line. So you can do that, but if we do it, it needs to be done very, very cautiously because it ties hands. And you end up in a situation, and Mark, you came from Hartford, where Hartford got a little carried away, and their debt service got so high that it swallowed up the entire operating budget. It became very hard, and I forgot you were there as well. But
Fortunately, before they got into that trouble.
so that was the problem.
I came in to help clean it up.
But that's the danger that can happen. And so you guys are the go-go board, we're the capital rates board by the charter design. And that's the balance of the power, the checks and balances, and as we, the three legs of the stool, as we try and figure it out. Decision, we like that you're like that. That's the exciting, you're on top of the things. And, sometimes we're the reviled board because we're the tap and rates, let's think about it, what's the impact going to be. So it's, it's the checks and balance. I think we're all trying to get there, and we'd like to do it. But I don't know, I can't answer that question. Is it legal? Yes, it's legal.
I mean, another way to think of it as, the longer the term you go out, the more interest you're paying, right? And by paying more interest, you're reducing your ability to do additional projects.
That's exactly right.
It costs more.
It costs more.
Yeah, so
It's
there,
quite significant right now.
Yeah.
when the interest was at, 0.2%, maybe that makes sense,
Yeah.
right? Does it make sense now? Probably not, right?
When we said yes to the interest rates were.
Right.
And we had to go and pay for the start payment for that.
Although we did really well with the bonding thing, and then,
Extremely well.
Not that Amy knows I'm not competitive, but we did better than Tom. When we went out, so kudos to Amy and her team for getting that done. Yeah, so,
There's tremendous value in maintaining our AAA status. It's that status that allows us to get the most competitive rates out there.
and one of the things they did highlight in going out to awarding that is they highlighted our financial policies, which are the sheet you see every day that every guy's glanced over and you think, oh my God, just keep showing it again. But that's the reason why we have the AAA. Or part of the reason, not the only.
So question on the athletic fields. Have we thought about, sort of correlated with the idea of turf, we thought about turning that, I'm a bit of a one-trick pony with my last question on that, but we thought about turning that into a revenue generating source? Because my kids are in club sports and I spend thousands of dollars every year on basically renting. A big portion of what we pay for is renting field space. And like these turf fields are like around the clock. Like if you ever go to the new dome in Day Hill, around the clock and totally utilized. I just wonder if there's an opportunity for us to, I realize it would cost more money, but I also, I've been on the board of one of the youth sports teams, and I know they're ready, willing, and able to spend some money to help to put some of these fields in place, so I know we probably don't want to be running a business, but at the same time, it just feels like it's an opportunity. I don't know if you guys have thought about that, or I'd be willing to have a conversation with you offline as well.
I can tell you the conversation did come up with a couple of locations in town. One of the issues we have, and I think Mike would probably know, a lot of our athletic fields are in currently wetlands or near wetlands. And you wouldn't want to build.
That's why it took me 20 minutes to get here.
Right. So the problem with a lot of our existing open space in town is it's close. There's going to be permitting issues with that or wetlands issues. It's something we talked in concept-wise. I mean, you look at the problem at the high school. I mean, where that is too. There. So location. If you build by ISCC or something like that, where it's up high, maybe that works out great. That's a great spot for something like that. Curtis Park may not be the best spot for that, or some of our other open spaces may not be the best spot. But certainly, if we do that, then you're looking at other costs that the town's going to run, or would it be better to privatize, attract somebody to do that.
Got it. Thank you.
Matt, do you have anything else you wanted to add? Anything from the Board of Education you haven't heard from you? Is there anything? Jeff? In your process, can you talk a little bit about facilities enrollment and how that works under capital? Unless you have, can you do that?
We have facilities enrollment committee primarily looking at the physical plants and the enrollment projections as you've seen. But
We update that on an annual basis, but that committee was put together for the long-term study. It's kind of, it's not standing.
Got it.
Yeah, so it's not meeting right now,
Okay.
if that's what you're.
Yes, that's what I was
Yeah.
asking. Wendy?
I don't know if this is relevant, but a lot of us at the table in the room were at the zoning hearing last night, right? And there's a proposed apartment complex of 583 units. And there was, a lot of discussion of people don't own apartments in town, the nature of the town and the cost of the rentals. But, and I believe someone's looking into that, but is there a grand list, would we end up potentially with extra grand list after we've paid all the expenses, the school expenses, the enrollment expenses, the police expenses, You know, is that something that we can look into or we're looking into?
Yes, let me comment that one of the things that George asked the developer to do, and George is here tonight, he can comment further, was to prepare a fiscal impact analysis. And they did that initially looking at the schools.
Right.
Estimated additional enrollment from this development and the cost to the education system. And then what the tax revenues would likely be. They showed a net benefit from that analysis. I understand from George that Silverman is going to do a fuller fiscal impact analysis that looks at more than just education costs and benefits. The number of students that the fiscal impact analysis showed was a range, I think, George, of like 95 to 115 coming out of the Hartford South, and that's very similar to the ratio we saw from the Hartford North development, where I think they had 50 plus or minus students. So it looked like a pretty reasonable estimate. We are doing some work internally to see if we come up with similar numbers. We haven't completed that yet, but it looked like a fairly reasonable estimate. George, any further comments?
I would add just two things. They completed a school impact study, and Mr. Sullivan has a copy of that, and I expect that he'll make some comment about that study. And in addition, the applicant has committed to a full fiscal impact study by about the first of the year, and when we get that, we'll distribute it to folks who can review it.
All inclusive of fire, EMS.
Yeah, including all kind of
all taxes.
townwide impacts.
And then will the town verify that it's accurate, like in realistic?
Yeah, to the extent we can, sure.
So
Yeah.
there's, future potential. Again, that's the cost benefit. People don't want the departments, and do we want our taxes to go up? And that's why we're good to have some.
I would just ask you to think about, I really question that there's a net benefit to the schools. When you're talking about 100 extra kids potentially, let's say that's probably on the low end. That's 4, if not 5 extra classes. That means more teachers. That means more buses and bus routes. That number, you can multiply that where we are already stressed, especially in that section of town, with our physical plants. Again, we're talking about increased enrollment even before a shovel was put in the ground for that. And the stresses are very real and very concerning to this board.
Especially with
and they have not
four-bedroom
come
homes.
before us. Let's be clear. They have not come before us.
Well, that was Susan Salini back when last.
And I said the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sharon, yeah. Yeah.
But I invited them.
We did.
So I'll just offer, and I appreciate, Wendy, that you were asking, and that town staff may be already doing this. I think that it's fair and reasonable that they're going to provide some numbers, and I also expect that they're going to provide numbers. They will provide them that look favorable to the message that they want to convey. I think it's incumbent on us as policy boards and leaders in the community to encourage our own analysis to ensure that we're doing the right planning. I'm not so sure I'm going to see a positive benefit on revenue. It may be something that ends up happening in the town and that development happens, but it also is important for us in the planning now, including what Leah's put together and staff has put together on the CIP and planning forward, and knowing that this is likely going to happen and what we need to put aside to plan forward.
That's a great point, that we would make sure that our administrative side really evaluates the numbers that Silverman
Let me add, if I may, that the chair of our Board of Finance is an outstanding researcher. She and Franklin Baruka, I think, can go head to head in terms of their research abilities.
I love Franklin.
Now I wish I had taken the tension tamer tea instead. opposite of the Wildberry Zinger.
But Lisa, I think it was Lisa that pointed out to us that a fiscal impact analysis had been done for the town of South Windsor. So we circulated that around, and the methodology they used to come up with school impacts is very similar to the methodology that was used by the firm that did the analysis for the Silverman Group. So I think it's fairly credible, but certainly, deserves a further review and vetting before we come to a conclusion about there being a net benefit or not.
And that's not the only high-density project that's on the books.
Right.
So there's a bigger impact than just that project.
Right.
Question on the north side of the 50-some odd children or students were they all in the same bouts, like all in the elementary level, or was that spread over the district?
No, it's spread over the district.
Right.
There's a little heavier density with elementary, but what you have to, one of the things among the factors is that you do have to look at whatever the number is spread across 13 grades.
Right.
And so that, while a number originally kind of goes, whoop, that's a big number, as you spread it across the age range of a K-12 system, it in places can be absorbed and in places presents a greater challenge.
So my recommendation is that we will close the Triboard. We still have actually a bunch of business to take care of on our board that we will be considering as our board, the initial guidance and targets. I do just want to talk with Matt, I've talked with the media, I've talked with the chairs, Jeff and Wendy, but I'll just say it publicly. The initial guidance will be based on the CFP and COLA and the information we know as of tonight. It will change over time. We totally get you have not started your budgets, and there may be priorities and mandates that you need and want to fund, and we get that. And we will continue that dialogue. So it will be an initial guidance and an initial target. It will probably be much lower than that perhaps you would want. But maybe not, because we haven't voted. I don't know what it's going to be, but if past is prolonged, tax increase always below COLA. But debt service and the loss of revenue, that's a makes for a tough year. That said, we do know that there are three legs to the stool. It's not just affordability, but it's also the needs to make a great education and to make a great town. So we'll try and balance those together within a collegiate manner. I really appreciate every comment about us in there. I learned a lot. Looking forward to working with all of you.
Thank you, Chair.
If you want to stay and see Amy's model, it's very cool. And we're going to be using it a bit of later. And it's been a great resource to us to sort of help see the big picture. And remarkably, her projections were very good. We said, how good is the model? Well, the fixed costs came in pretty close to what she had projected. So kudos to Amy on that. I just want to emphasize she deserves a major award. Try
Yes.
and find a way to get it.
As long as it doesn't cost anything.
Capital Reserve.
Capital Reserve, there you go.
That's right. Oh, you learned too much.
Oh, I knew it already.
So that's